Every generation produces individuals whose talent is so extraordinary that the world has no choice but to pay attention. They rise from difficult circumstances, overcome obstacles that would have crushed most people, and become living proof that discipline, sacrifice, and relentless determination still matter. Those stories inspire millions because they remind us that success isn't reserved for the lucky. It's earned through countless hours of work when nobody is watching. Yet history also teaches another lesson that often receives far less attention. The greatest threat to extraordinary success usually doesn't come from an opponent, it comes from the person who achieved it. That's why this conversation isn't really about boxing. It's about life, character, discipline, and the dangerous illusion that personal choices no longer matter once fame and success arrive. I've watched enough public figures over the decades to recognize a pattern that repeats itself over and over again. Rarely do gifted people lose because their talent suddenly disappears. More often than not, they lose because they become distracted by their own emotions, consumed by public opinion, and determined to fight battles that never needed to be fought. Somewhere along the journey, they stop protecting the very image that helped them rise to the top. Nobody is perfect, and I'm certainly not presenting myself as someone who has all of the answers. We've all made mistakes, and we've all had moments we'd rather forget. But there's a difference between making private mistakes and turning those mistakes into public spectacle that overshadows years of excellence. When someone reaches the highest level of achievement, every decision they make carries additional weight because millions of people are watching. Fair or unfair, that's simply the reality of becoming a public figure. That's why I believe today's young people need examples that teach more than just how to become successful. They need examples that show them how to stay successful. Winning championships, building businesses, creating wealth, or becoming famous are only a part of the journey. Learning how to protect your reputation, your peace of mind, and your legacy may actually be the more difficult challenge. Success without wisdom has destroyed many promising careers long before age or competition ever had the chance. When I look at what's unfolding today, I don't simply see another celebrity controversy. I see a valuable lesson that every athlete, entertainer, entrepreneur, content creator, and ambitious young person should study carefully. Talent can open doors that most people only dream about walking through, but character determines whether those doors remain open. That's a lesson our society desperately needs to hear again. When you honestly examine the accomplishments of Claressa Shields inside the boxing ring, there's no denying that she belongs among the greatest female fighters the sport has ever seen. Winning 2 Olympic gold medals is an accomplishment that very few athletes in history will ever experience. Add multiple world championships across different weight classes, and you've created a resume that should have placed her in position to become one of the most marketable athletes in the sport. Her journey from humble beginnings to international recognition represents the kind of stories corporations usually love to associate with their brands because it reflects perseverance, determination, and excellence under pressure. That's precisely why the current situation feels so disappointing. Someone with those credentials should be spending this stage of her career expanding her business opportunities, building generational wealth, mentoring younger athletes, and strengthening a legacy that could last for decades after retirement. Instead, far too much public attention has shifted away from her incredible athletic accomplishments and toward emotional social media exchanges, personal relationship controversies, live stream confrontations, and daily online conflicts. That's never the direction you want the public conversation to take when your profession depends as much on your image as it does on your talent. Many young people believe endorsements are awarded simply because someone wins championships. That's one of the biggest misconceptions in professional sports. Companies don't invest millions of dollars solely because an athlete is talented. They invest because they believe that athlete represents values their customers admire and trust. Every endorsement is a business decision, and businesses spend enormous amounts of money protecting their reputation. The moment an athlete begins generating more controversy than confidence, executives quietly begin reconsidering whether that partnership still makes financial sense. That's why I often remind people that your reputation eventually becomes more valuable than your resume. You may be the best in the world at what you do, but if your public image begins creating unnecessary distractions, those opportunities slowly begin disappearing. Most companies would rather walk away from an exceptionally talented person than constantly explain controversial headlines to nervous shareholders and concerned customers. That's not always fair, but it's the reality of how business works. Whether people want to admit it or not, there's no separating a public figure's private decisions from their public image. That's simply the price of fame. The moment you become someone who earns a living from public support, every major decision you make becomes part of your brand. Fans invest emotionally in the people they admire, and companies invest financially in personalities they believe will reflect positively on their products. Once controversy becomes attached to your name, that investment becomes much riskier, no matter how talented you may be. In my opinion, this is where so much of the current situation has gone off the rails. Instead of the headlines being centered on remarkable accomplishments inside the boxing ring, the conversations have become dominated by relationship drama, emotional social media exchanges, and constant attempts to defend personal decisions before the court of public opinion. That's never a winning strategy because public opinion is impossible to satisfy. The more energy you spend responding to critics, the more oxygen you give the controversy itself. Before long, people stop talking about your victories and start talking about your personal life. One of the most difficult realities for modern celebrities is understanding that perception often becomes more powerful than facts. Fair or unfair, people form opinions based on what they repeatedly see. When your name becomes connected to conflict day after day, those impressions begin to stick. It no longer matters how many championships you've won if the average conversation about you revolves around emotional outbursts instead of athletic excellence. That's a painful shift because it slowly changes the public memory of who you are. The relationship aspect of this situation has only intensified those perceptions. My opinion is rooted in principles that many people consider old-fashioned, but I believe those principles have endured because they provide stability. I've always believed relationships should follow a natural progression. People should meet, date, spend time learning one another, court seriously, become engaged, and then marry before building a life together. That order isn't about being judgmental. It's about creating a strong foundation that minimizes confusion and unnecessary heartache. When someone becomes romantically involved with a person whose marriage hasn't fully reached its legal conclusion, whether the paperwork is signed or not, questions are naturally going to arise. Those questions don't disappear simply because people want them to. They become part of the public conversation. And for someone whose career depends heavily on public perception, those conversations can become very expensive. That's not condemnation. That's simply recognizing how reputation works in the real world. One of the biggest traps facing public figures today is the belief that every criticism deserves an immediate response. Social media has convinced many successful people that silence equals weakness, when in reality, silence is often the strongest response possible. Every time a celebrity goes live to defend themselves against another accusation, another rumor, or another insult, they unintentionally give that negativity a larger audience than it would have ever had on its own. What concerns me even more is the emotional tone that often accompanies these live streams. Anger may generate clicks, but it rarely generates respect. Bitterness may create temporary headlines, but it doesn't build lasting admiration. Fans generally don't want to feel like they're constantly being scolded, insulted, or dragged into someone else's battles. They want to celebrate greatness. They want to be inspired. They want to support someone who appears focused, confident, and emotionally secure. One of the most troubling examples has been the public criticism directed towards supporters themselves, calling fans broke or belittling the very people you're asking to purchase tickets, pay for pay-per-view events, or support your brand creates a contradiction that's difficult to ignore. Those same individuals help elevate your career. Without fans, there are no sold-out arenas, no endorsement opportunities, no sponsorships, and no lasting legacy. Respecting the people who support you should never feel optional. I've often said that success has a way of magnifying whatever already exists inside a person. If a person is humble before fame, success usually makes that humility even stronger. If a person struggles with insecurity, fame often amplifies those insecurities because every criticism suddenly feels personal. Social media becomes a dangerous mirror that reflects not only public opinion, but also our emotional weaknesses. That's why emotional discipline has become just as important as physical discipline in today's world. Another lesson that stands out to me is how destructive comparison has become. Instead of remaining focused on personal growth and professional excellence, far too many people become obsessed with proving themselves against someone else. Social media encourages that mentality because every post, every comment, every photograph, and every outfit becomes another opportunity for comparison. Before long, people begin measuring their worth through someone else's life instead of appreciating their own unique path. In this particular situation, many observers have pointed out similarities in appearance, fashion choices, and public behavior that have fueled even more online debate. Whether those observations are completely accurate or not isn't really the larger issue. The larger issue is that once the public begins discussing whether you're competing with another person's image, you've already lost control of your own narrative. The conversation is shifted away from your accomplishments and toward unnecessary distractions. Confidence never needs constant validation. Truly secure people don't spend every day convincing the world they're winning. Their work speaks for them. Their achievements speak for them. Their consistency speaks for them. The louder someone has to proclaim their superiority, the more people begin questioning whether that confidence is genuine or simply covering deeper insecurities. The greatest champions I've observed throughout my lifetime understood something that many people forget. They competed against the standard they set for themselves, not against the opinions of strangers. They woke up every morning asking how could they become better than they were yesterday. They weren't consumed by social media arguments because they were too busy mastering their craft. That's the mindset that creates lasting greatness. Every successful person eventually reaches a crossroads where they must choose between humility and ego. Humility allows you to continue learning even after you've reached the top. Ego convinces you that you've already learned everything worth knowing. Once that happens, growth begins to slow because correction is viewed as an insult instead of a gift. I've seen this pattern play out across sports, entertainment, politics, business, and everyday life. The people who remain successful for decades usually surround themselves with individuals willing to tell them uncomfortable truths. They welcome constructive criticism because they understand that accountability protects them from making costly mistakes. The people who fall apart often remove every honest voice from their circle until only applause remains. That's one of the most dangerous places any successful person can find themselves. When every disagreement is dismissed as jealousy, every criticism is labeled hate, and every opposing opinion becomes evidence of a conspiracy, reality begins slipping away. That's when people stop making wise decisions because they've convinced themselves they are always the smartest person in the room. Success doesn't eliminate the need for humility. It increases the need for it because the consequences of poor decisions become much larger. The strongest person isn't the one who wins every argument. The strongest person is the one who knows which arguments aren't worth having in the first place. Sometimes the greatest display of confidence is refusing to respond at all. Time has a remarkable way of exposing truth without us having to participate in every battle. Whether we realize it or not, every public figure becomes a teacher. Young people watch how successful individuals respond to criticism, handle relationships, manage money, overcome setbacks, and conduct themselves under pressure. They may never meet these celebrities personally, but they're constantly absorbing lessons through observation. That's why public behavior matters so much. Someone is always learning from what they see. My hope is that young athletes understand that championships alone won't guarantee lasting success. Professional excellence must be accompanied by emotional maturity, sound judgment, and personal discipline. Those qualities don't generate viral headlines, but they're often the very qualities that preserve careers for decades. The brightest stars don't simply shine because they're talented. They shine because they've learned how to protect what they've built. I also hope young men and women begin appreciating the value of building relationships with patience and intention. Our culture has become so obsessed with shortcuts. We want instant success, instant love, instant fame, and instant gratification. Unfortunately, shortcuts often create long-term complications. There's wisdom in allowing relationships to grow naturally through commitment, trust, accountability, and mutual respect before making life-changing decisions. When we abandon structure, we shouldn't be surprised when confusion follows. Dating has a purpose. Courting has a purpose. Engagement has a purpose. Marriage has a purpose. Those traditions weren't created to limit our freedom. They were designed to strengthen our relationships and reduce unnecessary chaos. While society may dismiss those values as outdated, I believe they are more relevant today than ever because stable foundations never go out of style. Watching someone with extraordinary talent struggle publicly isn't something that I celebrate. Quite the opposite. I'd much rather see gifted individuals maximize every opportunity available to them and create legacies that inspire future generations. But real encouragement sometimes requires uncomfortable honesty. Pretending everything is fine when warning signs are obvious doesn't help anyone. My observations throughout this monologue are exactly that, my observations and opinions. Reasonable people may disagree with some of my conclusions, and that's perfectly acceptable. Healthy discussion is how we all grow. What shouldn't be ignored, however, is the broader lesson beneath the headlines. Every decision we make either strengthens our reputation or slowly weakens it, especially when we've chosen to live our lives in the public eye. At the end of the day, championships eventually become memories. Trophies eventually collect dust, and social media trends eventually fade away. What remains is the reputation we've built through our words, our choices, and the way we've treated other people. That's the legacy that outlives every title and every paycheck. I've always believed that the greatest fight any of us will ever face isn't against another human being. It's against our own pride, our own ego, and our own unwillingness to accept correction. Win that battle, and you've already achieved something more valuable than fame. You've earned wisdom, and wisdom is the one championship nobody can ever take away from you. That's the lesson I hope every young person takes away from this discussion. Chase excellence with everything you've got, but never allow success to convince you that you're above accountability. Protect your character with the same intensity you protect your career, because opportunities come and go, but your reputation follows you for the rest of your life. That's a fight worth winning every single day. And I wish Claressa Shields carried herself in that manner. But I have a question for many of you if you've lasted this far with me. Can she change? Can she heed the words of so many people who are speaking the same message to her on social media as she gets angry and calls them haters? Will she see one day that the ways that she's executing and portraying on social media is taken away from her legacy and her reputation? Do you think that she can change? That's the question I want to know after listening to these words. I await your comments. I love your participation. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Until then, I'm on to the next one. LanceScurv out. I love you all. Peace.